The problem with COVID-19 vaccine rumors is that they spread and evolve about as fast as the virus does. But there are 3 things we know for certain. 1. COVID-19 vaccines are safe.
The CDC finding 16 to 24-year-olds who received the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine have experienced higher than normal cases of myocarditis and inflammation of the heart muscle. Myocarditis symptoms can include fever and fatigue, shortness of breath, and chest pain. The CDC said the higher rate of cases occurred especially among young men following their second dose of an mRNA vaccine.
Hello and welcome to Medical Dialogues. I'm Roshni Dal. Let's look at today's top health highlights. 84% higher risk of cardiac-related death among males in 18 to 39 years with mRNA vaccine, creating a scare among the patients worldwide taking the mRNA-based COVID vaccine. A recent advisory has been released by the Florida Department of Health in the US recommending against the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines for males aged 18 to 39 years old. This came after a recent analysis done by the Florida Department of Health revealed that there is an 84% increase in relative incidence of cardiac-related death among males 18 to 39 years old within 28 days following mRNA vaccination, whereas non-mRNA vaccines were not found to have these increased risk among any population. This sparked fears among patients worldwide receiving mRNA-based COVID vaccines such as Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna. The observation came after the Florida Department of Health conducted an exit disclaimer icon analysis through Analysis Self-Controlled Case Series, which is a technique originally developed to evaluate vaccine safety.
The FDA and CDC have seen early signs of a possible linkage between the Pfizer bivalent COVID shot and strokes. Reuters reports that a U.S. health safety monitoring system flagged that adults 65 and older were more likely to suffer an ischemic stroke in the first 21 days after receiving Pfizer and BioNTech's updated COVID-19 booster than during days 22 to 24.
2. COVID-19 vaccines are effective.
All right, let's get into our top story, shall we? So let's talk about the big news of the day. So just, breaking news just a short time ago, before we came on the air from the Washington Post. Now, again, this is Jeff Bezos's Washington Post, okay, reporting that for the very first time, vaccinated people make up a majority of COVID deaths. This is the Washington Post headline just a short time ago. Vaccinated people now make up a majority of COVID deaths. That is the headline. And so I want to go a little deeper into this, which is I would say a bombshell story.
Yes, it is, but it's an analysis of data. They are just, under normal circumstances, they might post this as a bombshell story, but for the most part, it's just, here's the data, guys. We'll see how much the mainstream media
picks up with it. Yeah, it's the data, though. It's important to tell us where the data came from. It came from the CDC.
Right.
So the data came from the CDC that the Washington Post covered. Okay, so let's go through what the Washington Post says about the CDC data. For the first time, it says, a majority of Americans dying from the coronavirus received at least the primary series of the vaccine. 58% of coronavirus deaths in August were people who were vaccinated or boosted. Now, this is from August's data. This is not even September yet. According to an analysis conducted for the Health 202 by Cynthia Cox, vice president at the Kaiser Family Foundation, it's a continuation of a troubling trend that has emerged over the past year. As vaccination rates increased and new variants appeared, the share of deaths of people who were vaccinated has been steadily rising. In September 21, vaccinated people made up just 23% of coronavirus fatalities. In January and February this year, it was up to 42%. That was January, February. Per our colleagues, Finet Narapil and Dan Keating, we can no longer say, they say, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
You hear that, politicians?
We can no longer say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. From the Washington Post, quoting this analysis from the CDC.
3. To learn more, you should go straight to the experts.
Modern life in complex societies heavily depends on knowledge from others. Without trust, we cannot learn from each other, work with each other, live with each other. Maybe the question should be instead, how do we know who to trust? For that, we don't need to trust blindly. We need healthy skepticism. We need to learn to trust the trustworthy expert.
We partnered with a group at the New York Blood Center and the Galveston National Laboratory to take on the big scientific challenge of coronavirus vaccines. And I say a scientific challenge because one of the things that we're not hearing a lot about is the unique potential safety problem of coronavirus vaccines. This was first found in the early 1960s with the respiratory syncytial virus vaccines, and it was done here in Washington with the NIH and Children's National Medical Center, that some of those kids who got the vaccine actually did worse, and I believe there were 2 deaths in the consequence of that study. Because what happens with certain types of respiratory virus vaccines, you get immunized, and then when you get actually exposed to the virus, you get this kind of paradoxical immune enhancement phenomenon. And we don't entirely understand the basis of it, but we recognize that it's a real problem for certain respiratory virus vaccines. That killed the RSV program for decades. Now the Gates Foundation is taking it up again. But when we started developing coronavirus vaccines, and our colleagues, we noticed in laboratory animals that they started to show some of the same immune pathology that resembled what had happened 50 years earlier. So we said, oh my God, this is going to be problematic.
Nasal titers are a very poor indicator as opposed to blood-based titers of infectious virus. What NBC News dropped yesterday was the statement sourced from an unnamed government official that the titers in the vaccinated are actually higher than in the unvaccinated. What does this mean? And why do you suddenly see this kind of frantic scramble? This is precisely what one would see if antibody-dependent enhancement was happening. What is antibody-dependent enhancement? Briefly, it's that the vaccine causes the virus to become more infectious than would happen in the absence of vaccination, would cause the virus to replicate at higher levels than in the absence of infection. This is the vaccinologist's worst nightmare. It happened with the respiratory syncytial virus and in the 60s and caused more child deaths in vaccine recipients than unvaccinated. It happened with Dengvaxia, the dengue vaccine. And it's happened with virtually every other coronavirus vaccine development program, certainly in humans, known in history. And it's what the vaccinologists like myself have been warning about since the outset, is the risk of antibody-dependent enhancement. And I don't mean to sound alarmist, but what it seems to be rolling out is the worst-case scenario, where the vaccine in the waning phase is causing virus to replicate more efficiently than it would otherwise, which is what we call antibody-dependent enhancement. That's what the word is. And people have been warning about this since the outset of this rushed vaccine campaign.